August 19, 1944, East Prussia. Inside a dimly lit command room, maps cover the walls, each line marked with fading pencil. General Alfred Jodl studies the latest reports. Patton's spearheads have raced 400 miles from Normandy, far beyond their supply lines. The figures are clear. The Americans must halt within days. Even the greatest army cannot outrun its fuel. Outside, rain lashes the pine forests around Hitler's Wolfschanz headquarters. Officers whisper that the Western Front will stabilize soon, that German science and discipline will hold where chaos rules the enemy. Yet beyond the reach of German radio, an ocean of engines is already moving east. 5,000 trucks, headlights blazing, roll through the night on a one-way highway to history. The operation has a name the Germans have never heard before: the Red Ball Express. In 1939, Hitler's Germany stunned the world with a new way of fighting. Blitzkrieg, lightning war, combined tanks, aircraft, and mechanized infantry in synchronized speed. It wasn't just strategy, it was theater. In Poland, France, and the Low Countries, armored divisions broke through enemy lines and paralyzed defenders before they could react. Columns of panzers pierced deep, cutting supply routes, surrounding armies, and forcing surrender in weeks. But Blitzkrieg carried its own hidden weakness. Every mile gained stretched the supply lines thinner. Fuel, ammunition, and spare parts struggled to keep up. In Russia, that flaw became fatal. The Wehrmacht's advance toward Moscow bogged down in mud, snow, and mechanical failure. Trucks sank axle-deep in frozen roads, and horses, still 80% of German transport, froze in their traces. By 1943, the limits of Blitzkrieg were exposed. Speed had given way to starvation, momentum turned to attrition. Germany's tanks were still lethal, but their engines starved for fuel. Factories could not replace lost vehicles fast enough. The brilliance of Blitzkrieg, built on movement, had run out of motion. Now, as 1944 dawned, the war was turning. The Allies had landed in Normandy. Hitler's armies still believed they could stop them if logistics stopped them first. Across the Channel, a different kind of army was moving, not of tanks and guns, but of engines, cranes, and trucks. By mid-1944, the United States had built a logistical network unlike anything in history. From factories in Detroit to ports in Britain, an unbroken chain of movement spanned oceans. Liberty ships launched every 4 days. Pipelines carried fuel under the English Channel. Railways, depots, and workshops operated with the rhythm of industry rather than the rigidity of the battlefield. When Allied forces stormed ashore on D-Day, their success depended not only on courage but on supply. Each division required thousands of tons of food, fuel, and ammunition every day. As front lines expanded eastward, those supplies had to cross shattered roads and destroyed bridges through a France still burning from retreating German demolition teams. To German observers, it seemed impossible. Their own experience in Russia had proven that even the most mechanized army would collapse once distance outran delivery. They believed the same law of war would trap the Americans, but American planners thought differently. They didn't intend to match German precision, they meant to overwhelm it. They built what German officers would later call industrial warfare, a system that valued volume over elegance, speed over order, and redundancy over perfection. In the summer of 1944, as Patton's tanks raced east toward the Seine, that system was tested to its limit. German generals waited for the inevitable silence, the moment when the American advance would run dry. Instead, they heard a sound that would echo across the night, the endless rumble of trucks carrying America's answer to Blitzkrieg. To understand the clash between Blitzkrieg and logistics, one must look beyond the battlefield. It was a conflict between two philosophies of war, one rooted in precision, the other in production. Germany's military culture prized control, hierarchy, and technical excellence. Every movement was calculated, every order documented. The Wehrmacht's brilliance lay in synchronization, armor, infantry, and air power converging like clockwork. But that same precision made it brittle. When a single gear broke, the whole machine stopped. German officers called it Kampf ohne Zufall, warfare without chance. America's doctrine was the opposite. It embraced chance and conquered it with scale. If a truck broke down, 2 more took its place. If fuel was lost, more arrived tomorrow. There was no obsession with elegance, only results. The United States treated logistics like an assembly line, continuous, adaptable, and fueled by sheer capacity. While Germany built weapons of perfection, Tigers, Panthers, Messerschmitts, America built millions of weapons that simply worked. The M4 Sherman, the Jeep, the CCKW-2, a half-ton truck, none exceptional alone but unstoppable together. Blitzkrieg sought to win battles before logistics mattered. America sought to make logistics itself the weapon. In 1944, that idea became reality. The Red Ball Express, created almost overnight, embodied this philosophy. It ignored German rules of warfare: no blackout, no pauses, no elegant formations. It was chaos organized by confidence, a moving river of engines and steel that flowed faster than any plan could predict. For Germany, war was art. For America, it was engineering. And in 1944, the engineers were about to prove that industry could outfight ideology. Yet beneath the thunder of engines, there was a human story, one that struck at the heart of Nazi ideology itself. Of the 23,000 men who drove the Red Ball Express, nearly three-quarters were African American. They served in a segregated army that denied them equal rights, yet they kept Patton's divisions alive mile by mile. Many had never left the American South before the war. Now they drove across France under blackout-breaking headlights, dodging wreckage, sleeping 2 hours at a time, and eating cold rations on the move. Some drove 72 hours straight, their hands bleeding from the wheel. They called their trucks Patton's Blood Bank and painted slogans on the sides: "Hitler, here we come." To German observers, the sight was incomprehensible. Nazi racial doctrine declared black soldiers unfit for technical work. Yet here they were, commanding convoys, calculating fuel consumption, repairing engines on the roadside, and outperforming the Wehrmacht's most disciplined logisticians. Their determination carried a silent defiance. Every mile driven was a denial of Hitler's world. This was logistics as human endurance, not just fuel and steel, but willpower and improvisation. When bridges collapsed, they built new ones. When roads washed out, they carved new paths through fields. Mechanics cannibalized parts from wrecked vehicles, swapping engines in 45 minutes. Nothing in German manuals prepared officers to understand such organized chaos. The Red Ball Express became more than supply. It became proof that industrial democracy could outlast military tyranny. It wasn't beautiful and it wasn't clean, but it worked. In the coming weeks, those convoys would transform Patton's halted advance into an unstoppable drive, and in doing so, they would redefine what power meant in modern war. By late August 1944, Patton's Third Army had advanced faster than any in modern history, 400 miles in 30 days, but his fuel tanks were running dry. Shells were stacked in depots hundreds of miles behind. German intelligence predicted what they called the inevitable pause. The Americans, they said, would halt within 48 hours. Physics would stop them where firepower could not. Then, in the gray light of August 25th, French villagers awoke to an unbroken column of headlights stretching from the horizon to the sea. Trucks rolled 20 hours a day, engines screaming, tires spitting gravel across ruined roads. Each carried 5 tons of fuel, ammunition, or food, and none turned back empty. The Red Ball Express had begun. Convoys operated on a one-way system, one road east for loaded trucks, one road west for the return. Military police cleared breakdowns with ruthless efficiency. Any vehicle slower than 25 miles per hour was pushed into a ditch. At every checkpoint, fuel drums, spare parts, and mechanics waited. There was no rest, no silence, no darkness. German reconnaissance units reported the spectacle in disbelief. Headlights visible for 20 kilometers. Vehicles without spacing. No camouflage discipline. Estimate 1,000 per hour. To them, it was insanity. To the Americans, it was victory by motion. Within 72 hours, Patton's fuel crisis vanished. His tanks refueled on the move, his artillery never stopped firing, and his armored columns smashed through German defenses along the Seine. Paris was liberated in a week. At German headquarters, reports arrived faster than they could be believed. The Americans hadn't paused, they had accelerated. The laws of logistics, it seemed, no longer applied. As September 1944 began, the Red Ball Express became a phenomenon that defied military precedent. Nearly 6,000 trucks moved 12,000 tons of supplies every 24 hours, more than any army had ever delivered across an active battlefield. From Cherbourg to the front, the convoys covered 700 miles round trip, each driver pushing the limits of exhaustion. German officers tried to comprehend it. Field Marshal model staff calculated the consumption: 300,000 gallons of gasoline burned daily just to keep the convoys running, more fuel than many German armies received in a month. Yet the flow never stopped. Every time a truck failed, another took its place. When roads clogged, engineers bulldozed new routes through the countryside. Captured German reports read like confessionals. One officer wrote, "They violate every rule, waste fuel, ignore concealment, exhaust men, yet succeed through sheer abundance." Another concluded grimly, "This is not war, it is industrial overflow." In the field, the drivers paid a brutal price. Accidents, fatigue, and enemy ambushes claimed hundreds of lives. Trucks crashed in fog, caught fire on steep grades, or exploded when overheated engines met leaking fuel. But the convoys rolled on, hour after hour, day after day. When Patton's 4th Armored Division advanced 67 miles in a single day, twice the theoretical limit of Blitzkrieg, even German staff officers were forced to admit the unthinkable. Speed, once their exclusive weapon, now belonged to the Americans. One Wehrmacht general summarized it bitterly: "We invented Blitzkrieg but never solved its limits. The Americans solved it with trucks." By September's end, the Red Ball Express had become the lifeline of an entire front, a roaring artery of engines that proved industrial endurance could overpower tactical genius. By October 1944, the numbers were staggering. 82 days of continuous operation. Over 400,000 tons of supplies delivered. 120 million ton miles covered. German defenses collapsed faster than they could regroup. The myth of Blitzkrieg, the art of winning before the enemy could respond, was undone by an opponent who could never be stopped. Where German strategy depended on precision, American success relied on motion. Captured officers admitted what they had witnessed. General der Panzertruppen Hans von Luck told his interrogators, "We knew we had lost when we saw your supply columns. You abandoned trucks we would have repaired, wasted fuel we could not spare, yet you never stopped. We were fighting your factories, not your soldiers." The Red Ball Express had changed the rules of modern warfare. It proved that wars were no longer decided by speed of attack, but by speed of supply, that the true weapon of victory was not the tank or the bomber, but the endless convoy that kept them alive. As rail lines were repaired and ports reopened, the Red Ball Express finally slowed. Its mission had lasted nearly 3 months, far longer than anyone planned. By then, more than 5,000 trucks had been destroyed or abandoned, and thousands of drivers had collapsed from exhaustion. Yet the operation had achieved what military theory deemed impossible. It kept an army advancing faster than any in recorded history. In the aftermath, its effects rippled far beyond the battlefield. The American logistical system it represented became a model for post-war strategy, corporate supply chains, and even interstate highways. Veterans of the Red Ball would later found the great trucking companies that connected America's cities. But for those who had seen it in 1944, its meaning was simpler. The endless columns of trucks had revealed a truth the German generals never grasped: that democracy's greatest strength was not discipline, but determination, not perfection, but persistence. When the guns finally fell silent in May 1945, one German commander summed up the transformation in a single line: "We were defeated not by Blitzkrieg, but by logistics." In the history of warfare, few contrasts are as absolute as Blitzkrieg and logistics. One was born of speed, precision, and command; the other of industry, improvisation, and endurance. Hitler's lightning war struck fast but faded quickly. America's slow, relentless engine never stopped once it started. The Red Ball Express proved that courage alone could not sustain a modern army, only organization could. It also proved that industrial democracy could outproduce and outlast totalitarian discipline. Every truck that rolled through France carried more than ammunition. It carried the weight of a nation that had turned its factories, its people, and its belief in freedom into motion. For the men who drove those miles, there were no medals, no glory, only exhaustion and pride. But history remembers their convoy as the moment when warfare changed forever. Blitzkrieg may have conquered nations, but logistics conquered the war. In the end, it was not brilliance that defeated tyranny. It was persistence, measured in gallons, tires, and the hum of 6,000 engines that never stopped until victory.